Yeah, and your point.
So,
I couldn't resist.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. B'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay. Who needs a Bible?
yes.
Hold on, we got one.
Well,
Yeah, why you scooch back there? Come on.
grab a chair. Yeah.
Who else needs one?
Time.
Okay. Here you go. Whoa! Kiss that for me, will you?
What did
We
you
do, thank you.
Just give it a kiss for me. Okay. Wednesday, we're going to do a class. Are we doing it Wednesday? Because I haven't seen any emails. But we are having a class Wednesday. Okay.
Emails are in, right?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Everybody knows.
Calendar.
Okay, so Wednesday, we're going to do a class on war and peace, conflict and resolution in Judaism. And it is, I'm sorry, I just had breakfast of Thai food just now.
It's 5 o'clock in the morning.
So yeah, it's right now in Israel it's 6:40. So because Judaism has a very, very distinct understanding of war, conflict, and resolution. Okay. So where do we end off? I think we were talking about Joseph, right?
Yep.
Okay. We finish Joseph's story?
Yeah.
We did. We finished all of Joseph. No, I don't think we did. I don't have it down. So Joseph, I think we finished where Joseph becomes the head of Egypt,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then after being the head of Egypt, how his brothers are in Canaan. I think that's where we left him, right?
Yes.
Does that sound right? Okay.
Correct.
So what ends up happening is there's a famine in Canaan, and the brothers come down, and the brothers don't recognize him. And so he says, "Where's the other brother?" Because he wants Benjamin. That's his actual full brother, same mom. And so he comes down. They all come down, and he says he sets up the brothers because they've been so bad. He knows in the past. And he says he puts his little golden cup in Benjamin's sack. And he says, "Wait, someone stole my cup. It's Benjamin." And all the brothers say, "No, take us. Don't take him." And he realizes that they've learned how to live life and that they're not treating anyone badly anymore and that they're good guys now. So he identifies, he says, "No, it's okay. I am your brother, Joseph." And they say, "You're messing with us. You are not Joseph. Joseph is dead." He goes, "No, I am your brother." And he says it. Let's find the exact verse. So he says it on chapter 45. Someone please read chapter 45, verse 1. Anyway, do you not have a Bible? I thought you do. It's just down there. It's like the 17-year-olds, you know what they're praying.
Sure.
All right, someone read 45, 1.
I will. And Joseph could no longer hold himself in check before all who stood in attendance upon him, and he cried, "Clear out, everyone around me." And no man stood with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians heard, and the house of Pharaoh heard.
Okay, so now here's the question. Remember, all this is about learning how to think like rabbis,
Okay.
learn to think Jewishly, which means we're looking in between the text. It says that Joseph made everybody leave the room, and then he identified himself with his brothers. How did he do that?
Showed he was Jewish.
Exactly. He dropped his pants and showed that he was circumcised because they're the only ones around.
Oh my God.
And that's why no one else had to be there, why no one else could be there. Or to quote my boys when they learned this and they were very little, he showed his pee-pee. Yes, that's exactly what he did. Because who else? The Egyptians aren't circumcising.
No.
So he says, I'm Joseph. They say, "No, you're not." He says, "Yes, I am." They say, "No, you're not." He says, "Everyone get out of here." He drops trowel and says, "Look." It's common sense.
You look stunned, Fiona.
No.
Isn't that kind of weak?
It is the mark of a Jewish male,
Yeah.
which is why in World War II, in the ghetto, most of the spies were female
Oh.
because you couldn't see if it was a Jewish spy who was a male. He'd say he's not Jewish. They'd say, "Well, drop your pants and we'll see." That's why you have these amazing heroes who are women heroines. So Joseph goes on. He brings everybody back, and everything's great. And in chapter 50, if I remember right, which I think I do, Jacob gets sick. Jacob dies. He blesses all of his sons, and you have the 12 tribes in a different way. Joseph gets split into Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, he gets a double blessing. His sons get blessings. Levi still has a blessing, but ultimately he's going to be separate from the tribes because he's going to be the priest, the Kohanim. Okay, but he blesses all of them. He blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, it's Joseph's sons, and he tells them all sorts of things, and then he dies. Now let's go to chapter 50. Please read someone chapter 50, verse 1. We just talked about this during Sukkot. Now we know Jacob dies on Erev Sukkot.
Yeah.
First evening of Sukkot. Go on.
Okay.
Somebody.
Joseph flung himself upon his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph ordered the physicians in the service to embalm his father. And the physicians embalmed Israel.
What does that tell us? Is embalming allowed?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can absolutely embalm someone in Judaism. That's not why we bury within 3 days, because you can embalm. We bury within 3 days for other reasons. We bury within 3 days because it's kinder to the family.
Yeah.
Because when you lose someone and you don't heal until you start grieving, and you can't really grieve till the burial happens. So he's embalmed. And go on, please.
Excuse me. It required 40 days, for such is the full period of embalming. The Egyptians bewailed him 70 days. When the wailing period was over, Joseph spoke to Pharaoh's court, saying, "Do me this favor, and lay this appeal before Pharaoh. My father made me swear, saying, I'm about to die. Be sure to bury me in the grave which I made ready for myself in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, let me go up and bury my father, then I shall return." And Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father, as he made you promise on oath."
Okay. So what happens? Keep going. Keep continuing.
So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all the officials of Pharaoh and the senior members of his court, all of Egypt's dignitaries, together with all of Joseph's household, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the region of Goshen. Chariots too and horsemen went up with him. It was a very large troop.
Keep going.
Oh, when they came to Golan Arad, which is beyond the Jordan, they held there a very great and solemn lamentation. And he observed a mourning period of 7 days for his father. And when the Canaanite inhabitants of the land saw the mourning in Golan Atad, they said, "This is a solemn mourning on the part of the Egyptians." That is why it was named Abel Mizraim, which is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he instructed them. His sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, I think. The field near Mamre, which Abraham had bought for a burial site from Ekron the Hittite. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father.
Okay. So what happens? Jacob, we know, dies. Jacob is associated with the holiday of Sukkot. He's associated with buildings, and Sukkah is the first building. The Midrash teaches that he was born and dies on Sukkot, on the first day of Sukkot. Okay? First time the word Sukkot is mentioned in the Torah is with regard to Jacob. So he dies on the 15th of Tishrei, and they have 70 days of mourning, which means that you're now at the 25th day of Kislev. And he travels, and then he ordains this 7-day festival. Okay? 1 day of travel, 7 days. So what, and ordain meaning that it's done forever, right? Ordaining is not, it's not, I'm saying today is a holiday. If I ordain today is a holiday, it means it's a holiday forever. October 7th should be a holiday forever. In my mind. Should be like Tisha B'Av. Okay?
Why isn't it?
Well, we just did it, so. Okay, so he ordains there's going to be this festival, start 8 days, 1 day of travel plus 7 days on top of it. This festival beginning on the 25th of Kislev, which is 70 days after. 25th of Kislev, thousands of years later, is the day that we start Hanukkah. So it's just so Hanukkah is and I can't say this enough because people forget it, which is weird to me, but that's okay. Hanukkah, on Hanukkah, you have, and this is part of the idea of Judaism. So there are two types of blessing formulas. I don't know if we've done that this here. We did it in Sukkah. I don't know if we did it here. There's two types of blessing formulas in Judaism. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us through the commandments and commanded us to fill in the blank. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the fruit of the vine. If it says who sanctified us through the commandments and commanded us to, it's a biblical. It has its roots in a biblical commandment. If it doesn't say Asher Kedishon V'Tzav V'Tzivanu, it is not. With me, everyone with me?
Yes.
Okay. So, blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us through the commandments and commanded us to kindle the Sabbath lights. That's based on biblical, right? Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the world, who brought forth fruit of the vine, is rabbinic. Make sense? So those are your two formulas. So whenever you hear who sanctified us through the commandments and commanded us to, that is a biblical, the roots are biblical, and the other is always the roots are not biblical, they're rabbinic. Okay? When we do a memorial, what do we always do on a yard site? Light a candle. Light a candle. So we're going to have 8 days of candle lighting. Okay? Right? We're going to have 8 days of candle lighting. Aren't we? Right? We're going to have to because it's a memorial for Jacob. Some 2,000 years later, 1,500 years later, whatever it is, 167 before the Common Era, when the Hashmoneans, when the Maccabees, they rededicate the temple, and there's 1 day of oil and lasts for 8 days. Now, maybe that happened on the exact same day. Maybe it happened in the same time period. Who knows? But they overlay the two holidays together. So Hanukkah, which means dedication, is overlaid on Jacob's memorial of 8 days, because Jacob's the father of all of us. Okay? So didn't anyone ever wonder why do you have two prayers on Hanukkah? The first prayer, on the first day of a third prayer, the Shachianu, but we only say that because it's the first time we're doing it that year. It's the first prayer. Okay? Lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah, who has commanded us to kindle the Hanukkah. That means it's biblical. And the next one is Sha'asa Nisim Lavatenu, who did wonderful things for our ancestors in days of old at this season. That's rabbinic. Why would you have a biblical commandment and a rabbinic commandment in the same blessing? Because it's a double holiday. The biblical part is in memory of Jacob, and the Sha'as Nisim, the rabbinic part, is because of the Maccabees. Alex learned something new. We can all go home now. Yes.
Was there a holiday before the Maccabees? Did they celebrate a holiday?
Yes, that's the point.
And what do we have a name for it?
No, it would have been the yard site of Jacob, just like the yard site of anybody. Yeah.
I had heard from another rabbi that there is another story about all this, that the reason it was 8 days that they celebrated Hanukkah is because they had postponed Sukkot because
Right. There's a commentary,
yes,
and that's why in the Talmud, Hanukkah is actually called a little Sukkot. Okay, so there is that relationship, but the holiday, the date of it, is here.
the date, yes.
Do you guys see that? Now, here's what's really cool. You've heard the idea that between Passover and Shavuot, we have the counting of the Omer, right? 50 days, 7 weeks. And they correspond to the lower 7 energy centers of Sefirot. We'll learn more about that later on in the year. It's 7 weeks. 70 days means there's 10 weeks. So you have, we're going to learn this later, 10 energy centers. Don't laugh at my drawing.
Looks like 10.
We haven't got to my drawing yet.
Circles.
That's about the southward.
It's better than I
It's like a drawing for acupuncture.
It's better than I can do.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's having a cigar. So during the 7 weeks between Pesach and Shavuot, we deal with these 7 energy centers. But during the 10 weeks between Sukkot and Hanukkah, we deal with all 10. Now, when you're building a house, so remember, Jacob is about building. Maybe that's really what's going on in Israel. I hadn't thought about that. But there's no place I could write an article about that one. No one would read it. 15 Orthodox Jews would read it, and that's it. Okay. So you want to build a house, right? What's the first thing you got to do?
Foundations.
Right? You create your foundation, right? That's all Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, all that stuff. And first thing you do is you got to draw architectural plans, right? And the first thing now that you're going to build is, right? You're going to build a frame. Right?
Yeah.
You build your frame. And then, I told you no laughing. No laughing in my architectural drawing. After your frame, you're going to end up building walls, right? And you're going to ultimately build, you're going to put drywall in. You're going to paint it. You're going to put in your windows, right? Skylights or whatever else. You're going to make sure that you've got your plumbing and that you've got your electrical and that you've got your in and out plumbing and whatever else it may be. All the permits you got to get. And what's the very last thing you do? When the building's entirely finished, you turn on the lights. And then you put up a mezuzah. That's what this 10-week period is between Sukkot and Hanukkah. It's the time to build the temple that you want in your life, whatever that may be, a relationship, a business, anything. On Sukkot, we build what the structure is. We can spend these 10 weeks focusing on each of the energy centers to build what we need, what we want, the temple, so to speak. And on the 10th of Hanukkah, we light it up. Now, when I learned about this, I thought the fact that Hanukkah and Sukkot were connected because of a calendar, I thought that was like the coolest little thing I'd ever heard. So I asked every one of my colleagues that I knew, and across the board, the Reform and Conservative colleagues had never heard it. Across the board, of the Orthodox said, of course. And here's the reason. We don't think Jewishly, and that's, I think, the key in this. We think January, February, March, April, May. We don't think Elul, Tishrei, Mar Cheshvan. Does that make sense? Kislev. So if you think in a calendar, then this makes perfect sense. Then you know 70 days after Sukkot is the 25th of Kislev. If you think instead in January, February, then the holiday's always late or early. When's the fourth? I feel like we did this last week. I don't remember. Maybe we did. No, okay. What's the fourth Thursday of Thanksgiving? I'm sorry, the fourth Thursday of November.
November is good.
If Christmas is on Sunday, what day is New Year's on?
Sunday.
That's natural for you. But it's not natural for us to think about things in a Jewish calendar, and that's really important. Okay? So Jacob is buried in Israel, and then Joseph dies at the age of 110, and they embalm him, and he's placed in a coffin in Egypt. We say, Hazak, Hazak, v'nisazek, be strong, and you will be strengthened. And then we begin the book of Shemot or Exodus. Okay? So, what happens in Shemot? Shemot means names, and it says all the people that are there in Egypt. And then in verse 8, it says a new king arose over Egypt who did not know of Joseph, who was not intimate with Joseph. So what most historians think happened is that, remember, Joseph's the vizier. He's the number 2 guy. So you guys want to feed your kids, and you've run out of food, so now I want your property. Now I want this, that, and ultimately you're not going to be happy with me. And eventually, when you overthrow and you take the kingship, you're not going to be so nice to me and my descendants. And that's what happens. Okay? And so they make the Hebrews into slaves. Now, the word Hebrew actually means to cross over. Okay? Ivrim means to cross over. So Ivrit, Ivrim, it means to cross over. What do we cross over? The River Jordan. Okay? So they make us into slaves. Okay? And Pharaoh has a prophecy that it's going to be a challenge that they're going to revolt. And that specifically, there's going to be someone who's going to arise, who's going to supplant him from the kingship. So he makes it a point that all firstborn, all Egyptian sons, or all Pharaoh's sons, all Hebrew sons, are to be killed. There are 2 women who don't do it. And we say that Puah and Shifra, and if you look, it says it in chapter 1. The Hebrew midwives, Shifra, and the second was Puah, which some say were actually Yocheved and Miriam, and said, how come you're not killing them? And they say, well, the Hebrew women are lively, so they give birth before we get there. Okay, so we say it is because of the women that we were saved from Egypt's slavery. And ultimately, they give birth, and you have this child in the tribe of Levi named Moshe, which means he was born from the water. Now, we all know the story, right? That he gets put in the basket, and Bachet, Pharaoh's daughter raises him. We know the story. And by the way, Prince of Egypt is much more accurate to the text than the Ten Commandments. But there's a midrash, a story that when she brings him to Pharaoh, baby, Pharaoh says, "Oh, I don't want to kill him because my daughter or my niece, whatever it may be, doesn't want me to. And my ministers are saying to kill him. What should I do?" This is an important part of the story. So the ministers devise a test. They put a glowing coal here, and they put Pharaoh's signet ring over here. And if the baby, who likes gold things, they figure the baby will go for the gold. If he goes for the signet ring, it means he's going to supplant Pharaoh so that he should be killed. If he goes for the coal, he's stupid. So don't worry about it. So the idea is that Moses' hand starts to go to the shiny ring, an angel pushes it to pick up the coal. Now, what does a baby do when they pick up something? Puts up and that's why he has a cleft palate. That's why he doesn't speak well, and that's why he needs Aaron to speak for him. Make sense?
Oh, yeah.
That's now you know why
It's all
Aaron.
midrash, of course,
But remember, that's oral Torah. That's oral Torah. So Moses goes, and we're going to bypass a lot of Moses' story because I think most people know a lot of it. The story of the burning bush, I think, is interesting. The bush was always burning, but no one noticed. So everyone's looking at me right now, right? How many rows of chairs without looking are on that side of Fiona?
6, 7.
I was guessing, right?
No idea.
Bet you've walked by it hundreds of times.
Yeah.
we don't notice. We don't pay attention. We don't pay attention. And Moses did. It's one of the reasons he had the merit to be Moses.
Excuse me.
There's a beautiful midrash that he's acting as a shepherd, and when he's in Midian and he sees a little baby goat running away, and he goes and gets the goat, and then he carries the goat on his back because he knows the little baby goat's tired. And God said, "That's who I want as a shepherd for my people." And again, where did Abraham? We had the idea of everything happens at a well, right? Jacob and Rachel. Where does Moses meet his wife? At a well. Again, we can see the recapitulation over and over. So Moses has this experience, and he says to him that he wants him to go to Egypt, and he wants to have his people be free. And he asks him his name. We find it in chapter 3, verse 24. I'm sorry, verse 14. Hashem answered Moses, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. I shall be as I shall be is not the right way of phrasing it. Ehyeh, I will be, asher ehyeh, I will be that I will be, is literally what it means. Ehyeh. The numerical value of which is 21. So whenever you see a 21, it's referring to that aspect of God, as opposed to 26. Remember, we talked about Yoreh Vavane. So there we go. And he goes to Egypt, and he throws his staff down, and it becomes a snake. And Pharaoh says, no big deal. And they throw their staffs down, and they have lots of snakes. Then Moses' staff eats all the other staffs, or the snake eats all the other snakes. And what ultimately happens that we will find on Moses and Aaron's his voice. Ultimately, we find on, does Moses ever want to be the leader?
No.
So we find on chapter 7, verse 14. Someone please read. It's the beginning of the first plague. Chapter 7, 14. Yeah, I can't help with that part.
Want me to read?
Yeah, please, go read.
And the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh is stubborn. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is coming out to the water, and station yourself before him at the edge of the Nile,
Sit down,
taking with you the rod that turned into a snake. And say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you to say, let my people go that they may worship me in the wilderness. But you have paid no heed until now. Thus saith the Lord, because by this you shall know that I am the Lord. See, I shall strike the water in the Nile with the rod that is in my hand.
Okay, so we all know this, that what he does is he makes the Nile into blood. Is that print a little better, or is that the same difference?
It's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have these plagues, 10 plagues, beginning with blood. Okay, this is Dam, Sardea, all that stuff, right? When you do that, by the way, in the Pesach Seder, don't lick your finger after the plagues. Wipe it on a napkin. Don't eat the plagues. Okay, I want to look at something though. It says here in verse 14, Pharaoh's heart is stubborn. And it's going to say throughout this that Pharaoh's heart is softened and Pharaoh's heart is hardened. Right? So if that's the case, why do we need the plagues? Think about it. If the plagues are to make Pharaoh let us go, then what do we need plagues for if God can soften and harden his heart?
For us.
It's for us. It's for us. Plagues are not for the Egyptians. They're for us. Because what had the Jews done? The Hebrews had done, they had started to assimilate and adopt the gods of the Egyptians. And so these plagues were not for the Egyptians at all. They were for us. Because if you look at each of these 10 plagues, they correspond to a different god in the Egyptian pantheon. and starting with the Nile and ending with the god of death. And so nowhere, this is not about for the Egyptians. The plagues are not for the Egyptians. They're for us.
Why don't you're the first rabbi I've never met who talks about the plagues this way?
I don't know why.
I wish I had an answer.
I
I
don't
have
know.
an answer, but I don't think it's very good. It's a very polite one, but that way.
So I was talking with my friend and teacher, Rabbi Shulchan, today. And we were talking about the idea of a non-practicing Orthodox Jew. He actually told me the root. You know, he's for years he calls me that. For years he calls me that. But apparently there was he was talking about a philosophy guy, I forget the guy's name, from Harvard, who had said that I am an Orthodox Jew who does not practice. So and I think it's a really important concept. So I'm going to pause on this for a moment because I can do that and we're in no rush. So we get through the series, we'll get through it.
I just have to go to CVS before 11.
Okay, well, no, didn't mean tonight we're no rush. I meant getting through the material. So, and I think it's an important one because I think that may be the future, the only future of Judaism. So, up until recently, you could become a Reform rabbi and never study Talmud. Talmud was not a mandatory course. I actually had a Reform rabbi say to me when I called him on publishing that Rabbi Barclay and his board should be arrested and die because we stayed open during the pandemic. I think I got an apology from him. I wonder why.
Not even yet after this time.
Are you kidding? Never. No one's ever. Not one person has ever said, "Wow, you were right." Wow, not one. So
Probably writes for the New York Times.
So
People do not.
So look, but and he said, and I said, look, it's this type of baseless hatred. You know what we're doing in our community, and moreover, it's not your community, and we have our own. I said, that in the Talmud it says that it's this type of baseless hatred that destroyed the temple. This is an exact quote. We are Reformed Jews. The Talmud means nothing to us. Okay? Yes, sir.
When you first said that to us a long time ago.
It wasn't that long ago. It's only a couple of years.
A year ago. I just don't understand how a man or a woman can call him or herself a rabbi and say that. Legitimately.
Okay. So let's have an honest dialogue. Again, I had this conversation with Rabbi Shulchan today. We were talking about it. For a lot of rabbis, it's a job. It's a profession. Okay? Might as well be a lumberjack or an attorney.
Yeah.
Or whatever else. And so why take a stand for Judaism? The fact that rabbis are calling for a ceasefire right now makes me want to get up and do some very non-rabbinic things. I'm devastated by the fact we need to do what we need to do, but Hamas is Amalek and needs to be destroyed utterly and completely, period. And we need to mourn it, and we need to cry over it, and we need to. It's sad. It's horrible. But his point is, I think there may be a point here that if you're not committed to Jewish values or Jewish teachings or Jewish text or authentic Judaism, and instead you're committed to social action, then things affect you differently because it's a job. In my mind, a rabbi should step up and lead. A rabbi should learn. A rabbi should teach. A rabbi should write. I mean, you guys have all gotten emails all week, right? For the last 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Those don't just magically happen. I mean, they do because I sent them to Orlando, and Orlando magically gets them out.
Thank you, Orlando.
But
The messenger.
I don't. I mean, it takes time and energy and bandwidth and a lot of things, but that's what a rabbi's supposed to do. Doctor's a doctor, right? Okay, that's what your job is. And if you're not interested in healing, don't be a doctor.
You know, you can be a pathologist.
You can be, but you know what I'm saying. If you're not interested in the body, don't be a doctor. And I think that maybe the answer is that there should be a category of non-practicing Orthodox Jews, meaning not necessarily people that are not necessarily wrapping tefillin twice a day and Shomer Shabbos and not mixing fabrics for shatnaz and all the different things. They're not necessarily doing them. They may or may not be. But that their values, their ethics, their thought system, their mind, their heart, and their soul are all Jewish. And unfortunately, we have, and I'll give a great example. How many of you who knew who Edgar Magnin was of blessed memory, Rabbi Edgar Magnin?
Oh, yeah, I know it.
Okay. Edgar Magnin knew more than most Orthodox rabbis do today. I don't know how many of you know that. Magnin was a genius. He met his congregation where they were. Alfred Wolf, God rest his soul, was maybe it's just I had a deeper relationship, a real relationship with him, as opposed to Magnin was kind of untouchable, even though we knew each other. These guys came out of an Orthodox background. They had huge knowledge. Not what was learned in the Reformed seminaries today. And if your seminary and your movement are focused on social action, businesses, the business just happens to be a synagogue, then that's what you're going to be. Look, the first week after this horrible attack happened, there was some sort of event with local synagogues. I wasn't going to go near it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't go near it. I'm sorry. Because I knew it was going to be kumbaya, let's make peace.
it was too.
So you went to it, and that's
No, I wouldn't go either.
But it's going to be kumbaya, let's make peace. I would love to have peace, but Hamas crossed a line, and it's evil. It's not easy to say, but it is, and that's Judaism is very clear. They attack children, weak, innocent. That is evil. That is Amalek. You destroy it. So yeah,
I think the rabbis who advocate what you're saying are in essentially a PR program. They're trying to be nice to what they consider as the left wing of this country.
or this is what they believe.
I don't
There's
believe it.
Oh no, I think a lot do, Alex. You're giving them more credit than I would. Look, there's a synagogue. Okay, I again, because we can always come back to the text.
It'll be there. It'll be there.
Hey, Orlando, did you know there's a candle from the Hanukkah down here, just sort of laying there? Just letting you know. It's okay. Just as long as you knew. Okay. So,
As long as it's not lit.
yeah. So, look, the Talmud has 3 sexes: male, female, and tumtum. That's it. Okay, tumtum means it's not unidentifiable. Sorry, that's what there is. There's not 180 sexes. Okay. I don't really care what anyone's sexual proclivity is. I really don't care. But there are things that belong in a synagogue and things that don't. Drag queen bingo doesn't belong in a synagogue. Don't laugh, because a really large, prominent Reformed temple within 15 minutes of here has been doing it, and very proudly. Okay? There is a temple on the west side. You have to be very careful not to say names per se. I should call it out. I called some of them out, but I can't call them out by names. We don't need war between Jews right now. But there's a temple on the west side, and every year, the last couple of years, on the evening before Kol Nidre, okay, they have a special cleansing program. It's on the west side by the beach, and you have to register for it because it's at a private beach where they have to cleanse yourself, a co-ed, clothing optional mikvah.
Yeah.
Now look, if you want to have an orgy, God bless you. I don't really care. But is that what belongs in a synagogue? Should that be a synagogue program? Look, if you guys want to go have an orgy, God bless you, just not in this building. right? Go have fun. I don't really care. Keep me out of it,
Not connected to hierarchy.
right? But this is what they do,
Where did he get the idea from?
appealing to the lowest common denominator.
Mm.
Thought that sex sells. As opposed to, I give a class, because you've been to it, on marital intimacy in the Talmud, right? It's the only class I will not teach to women. It's inappropriate. You can teach it to your wife, and then she can teach it to other women. I don't care, right? So you ask a question that's a deeper question, which is, why do rabbis phone it in? Why do they decide to say some things are not, it's just not important to really look at it? There's not a rabbi in this, I shouldn't say there's not. I would suspect that there are very, very few rabbis in this country who do not know the Hebrew conjugation of smichut, meaning that if I want to say, so the word for book is sefer. If I want to say your book, I say sefer cha. If I want the word for table is shulchan. If I want to say your table, I say shulchan cha. If I want to say the word for heart is lev. If I want to say your heart, I say lev cha. So why does the ve'ahavta say ve'ahavta es Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha with two V's? They'll know if they bother thinking about it, but they just rip right through it and don't even bother thinking. Wait a minute, the text is wrong here unless there's a hidden meaning. So I can't tell you why other people do or don't do what they do. I can tell you that I think that we need to create more Jews who are committed to being Jewish and not to being secular leftist or rightist, doesn't matter. Conservative or liberal, doesn't matter, but secular reformers. That we need to change the whole world in terms of making more, as Rabbi Shulchan calls it, more non-practicing Orthodox Jews.
Hmm.
So someone may not wrap tefillin every day, but they realize there's value to it. They just may not choose to do it yet. They may say, okay, you know what? I know the kosher. I understand why it makes sense. I believe in kosher. I think we should be kosher, but I eat lobster. That's where they are, fine. They want to eat insect, let them live and be well, just not around. Don't give it to me. Right? So I don't know the answer other than you need to really examine the text and not just, it's a rabbinic student goes to an old rabbi and he says, I went through the entire Talmud. I went through every page of the Talmud. The rabbi says, that's great. How many pages went through you?
Huh.
And sadly, that's not necessarily what people do. So does that kind of answer?
Yeah.
But the plagues are clearly not for the Egyptians, because if God can soften and harden Pharaoh's heart whenever he wants, and he does it repeatedly, why doesn't he just soften the heart and be done with it? It's because we need it, because we have adopted those Egyptian gods. Does that make sense to everyone?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question, not related. I hope I don't embarrass you or anything.
That's okay. I can say no.
How has Kabbalah influenced the way you look at things?
I'm going to ask you to put a pin in the question for now,
Okay,
till we get to Jewish mysticism.
okay.
Other than to say that there's a saying in the Tao Te Ching, which is a great book of Chinese philosophy and mysticism. To the one who does not know the Tao, a tree is a tree and a cup is a cup. To the one who is the student of the Tao, a tree is no longer a tree, a cup is no longer a cup. To the master of the Tao, a tree is a tree and a cup is a cup. Just deeper. And we're going to get into what Jewish mysticism is, and Kabbalah is not really a fair term for it, and we're going to learn why. Judaism is a mystical tradition. It is not a theological head tradition, intellectual tradition. It is a mystical spiritual tradition. Okay, and it is because one of the pathways to achieve that yichus, that unification with God, is through our intellect. It's easy to get lost that the intellect is the destination as opposed to the pathway. Who knows who Dennis Prager is? I have heard only one authentically, emotionally honest statement out of his mouth. Great mind, very all that. But I've only ever heard one really authentically spiritual, emotional statement out of his mouth, and I've known the man off and on for 30 years. It was 30 years ago when he looked at me very sadly and he said, I wish I could approach Judaism from my heart the way you do, but I can only approach it from my head. And that was long before he was, he didn't have a show. I think at that time he did Religion on the Line, and maybe he had just started his show, his daily show. So a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's easy to get lost in our heads. How many angels can dance on the head of a pin?
Mm-hmm.
But that's just a pathway to get to a different place. Judaism always has been about the spirit, the soul, the heart, not the mind. What has happened is over the last number of centuries, especially with Ashkenazi, is often it becomes only about the mind. You need to have one hand on the Torah and one finger on Rashi and understand. And it loses the soul of what it really is. Judaism theologically is more similar when you really study theology. It's more similar to Buddhism than it is Christianity. It's more similar to indigenous cultural traditions in tribes than it is to that. It is a monism, not a monotheism. It is meaning that God is everywhere, not that God is one God and separate. And it's about experience. So we do all these rituals and we understand it so that we can start to have deeper experiences and awareness. But that gets lost. And then it gets even more lost with rabbis. Ideally, you graduate rabbinic school and now you can start learning. You have enough knowledge to actually start studying. Right? But for how many?
Physicians.
It's true for physicians. It is true for physicians, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. But for how many rabbis is it true for?
Not too many.
Not enough. In the Orthodox world, for many of them. Many of them. But traditionally, but so we need to stay. Does that help a little bit? Okay. All right. So.
Thank you.
Does that help? So we got the 10 plagues, last of which is death of the firstborn. And they go out, and we all know the story, right? They pass over the firstborn of Hebrews, and they kill the firstborn of Egyptians, and then the Jews are thrust out very quickly, and they go, and they get to the Sea of Reeds, and already they are whining. Right? Why did you take us out here to die? We could have been comfortable slaves in Egypt. And a man named Nachshon from the tribe of Benjamin goes into the sea till the water's right above his lips, right below his nose. And the wind blows all night. And in the morning, depending on which midrash, there's one sandbar or 12, one for each tribe, or 600,000. Whatever it is, they cross the sea, or the water split. Cross the sea, the water ultimately comes down and kills Pharaoh's soldiers. And this is where that important midrash happens of the angels start to rejoice and God stops them saying, the work of my hands is being destroyed and you want to sing hymns of praise. We don't do that. I am as committed as I can be. We need to utterly destroy Hamas. And the reason I'm so puffy and tired is because I cry about that. Because it makes me miserable that we got to kill these people. And we do. And you don't negotiate with the cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to do this. So they get out of Egypt and they cross the Sea of Reeds. And from the very beginning, we get nothing but tsuras. They're doing nothing but whining, right? They get all excited. They have the Song of the Sea in chapter 15. By the way, if you look on chapter 15 of the book of Shemot, and you look on the Hebrew side, because I think all of you have Hebrew in your prayer book or in your Bible. No, okay. So if you look, then I'll just show you. This is what it looks like. And it looks like this in Torah. It literally looks different on the scroll. And one of the things with it is, did you ever wonder how it is that a rabbi can find where in the Torah, since there's no page numbers? Did you ever wonder that? How do you find a Torah? How do you find the parsha? How do you find the reading? So in between each chapter, there's a big blank space. So you can always see where the beginning of each chapter is, or each book is, excuse me. The book of Genesis, then there's a big space, the book of Exodus, then a big space, the book of Leviticus, right? But there are other markers, and this is one of them. It's the Song of the Sea. And so when you see that, as you're going up, I know that I am where I am in the book of Exodus. Okay? There's spacing, and so another place is going to be the Ten Commandments. Yeah, and that's how you know. It's markers. So they get out, and they have this amazing experience of Parsha Yitro, chapter 18, and they prepare for 3 days, and they receive the Ten Commandments. Moses goes up, and he comes down. Let's look at these statements. Chapter 20 of the book of Exodus. I am Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, your God, who has taken you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. You shall not recognize the gods of others in my presence. You shall not make yourself a carved image, etc. I've done this with you two before, so I might as well use you as again. Because you're a couple, and you're the only couple here right now. Can we be kind of to stand there? How many of you know how they met? Oh, well, let me tell you. Kellen was standing here. Actually, you can go on that side if you want. Kellen was standing there at a party. And if this isn't the truth, it is now. Scooch back a little bit. And Kellen was standing there, and Alan saw her. And his heart went thump, 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 thump. And he said to her his name. He introduced himself.
I am Alan.
She said, hi.
Hi.
Oh,
Tell me more. What do
Okay.
you?
And he said, and what did you tell her? What did you tell her? You told her you were what? What'd you do?
Back then, I don't know what I said.
What did you say? I'm a doctor. She goes, oh, good,
So
you're a
that,
doctor.
you know, yeah.
I'm a doctor.
Wish,
Okay.
doctor.
So what happens? They introduce each other, and they quickly say what they do, right? What they've done, what they do. And then they're a happy couple. You can be arm in arm now. Arm in arm only. Okay. Down, boy. Okay. So they're arm in arm, and we can tell on their face how they are, right? Because if they're next to each other, or if they're not, as long as they're always looking at each other, it's good. Instead, Alan's looking at Fiona. Why are we patting on my tuchus? Okay, he's looking at me, maybe. I don't know. So instead, so you see it on the face, right? Okay. And then thank you, sit down. And then they make agreements. They'll do this. They won't do that in their relationship. They have date night. They have whatever it may be. Okay. Let's look at what it really says in the Ten Commandments. Because it's a ketubah. This is the ketubah between us and God. This is the essence of it. Right here. I am Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. I am Alan. Who is taking you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. I'm a doctor. It's not a doctor, I guess it's a doctor, right? Now it says you shall not recognize the presence of others or the gods of others in my presence, except I hate that translation because that's just not what it says in Hebrew. Lo yihyeh lecha, there shall not be for you Elohim acharim, other gods, al panai. What's a punam? There shall be no other gods for you on your face. You're going to be in an intimate, loving relationship just with me. Okay? Because you know if they're a happy couple by their faces. Right? Doesn't matter where they are. They could be across the room, but they're constantly looking where his wife is, right? On the other hand, he could be next to her and he's going like this. Some other blonde, you can hit him.
Right.
That's right.
Right. Says it right here.
It does. That's right there. So, and then you have relationships. Do this, don't do that. You're allowed to do this, don't do that. Does that make sense? Ten Commandments is the essence of the ketubah between God and us. It is wedding vows. And there's 13 sentences in the Ten Commandments. 13 remembers the number of love. Right? The word for love, ahava, numerical value is 13. And we say Shavuot is the wedding between God and Israel. That's because the ketubah is here. Okay. So let's just fast forward a minute so we see this cycle of what actually happens in the world. So, because the calendar is so powerful. So one of the New Year's is Passover, one of the 4 New Years. And we call that the first month, actually, Nisan. So on Passover, we get engaged. God says, I am for you, you are for me. You're my special people, I am your special God. On Shavuot, that's a little better. We get married. What happens right after this in the story? Moses goes up, he comes down, and what does he see?
The golden calf.
The golden calf. So very quickly afterwards, we have an affair. The calf. Okay? Moses goes back up, comes down with a new ketubah. Okay, a second set of tablets. If you track the whole thing from the calendar, he comes back down on the 10th day of Tishrei, where we renew our vows. Okay, we remarry ourselves. We remarry with God. It's kind of like God is Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor over and over and over. That really dated me, didn't it? No one under the age of 50 would understand that.
I understand.
I said no one under the age of...
That's the problem.
Yeah.
What's the 10th day of Tishrei? Yom Kippur. That's why it's a happy day. God has forgiven us. We had an affair. God forgave us the 10 Commandments. God, we know, forgives on Yom Kippur. Immediately, we got to go off to a honeymoon, right? Which is Sukkot. Which is a honeymoon, which is why the sukkah is called God's little summer house. Right? So now we've already come back around here. We've gone through the cycle of being engaged and married, screwing up, getting renewing our vows, and then having a honeymoon. All in our calendar. Our relationship with God is you can look at through the calendar is the point. You can look at it and understand at a deeper level. So does that make sense to everyone?
Mhm.
So goes up, it comes back down, and the tablets are broken, and we move on from there. Any questions so far on all of this? Anything? So let's go to chapter 23. Right? And in chapter 23, verse 10, would someone please read? So now we've gotten, it's going back up, and we've got these laws that are happening. Go on and tell someone read verse 10.
6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield.
Keep going.
But in the 7th you shall let it rest and lie fallen. Let the needy among your people eat of it, and what they leave let the wild beasts eat. You shall do the same with your vineyards and your olive groves.
So every 7 year you gotta take a rest.
Right.
So Shabbat is not just for the humans, it's for everything, more than everybody. Please continue.
6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall cease from labor, in order that your ox and your ass may rest, and that your bondman
does my donkey need to rest? Go ahead.
and the stranger may be refreshed.
Okay, keep on. Keep on
Be on guard concerning all that I have told you. Make no mention of the names of other gods. They shall not be heard on your lips. 3 times a year you shall hold a festival for me.
Go on. 3 festivals.
Yeah. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, eating unleavened bread for 7 days, as I have commanded you. At the set time in the month of Abib, for in it you went forth from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty-handed, and the feast of the harvest of the first fruits of your work, of what you sow in the field, and the feast of ingathering at the end of the year.
Okay, what are those three festivals? Pesach,
Yeah? Feast of the harvest, that's
Shavuot, and Sukkot.
Sukkot.
Okay, these are the three festivals that are regalim. The festivals where you would have to make a pilgrimage ultimately when there was a temple. Okay, these are actually the Chagim. Chagim is used for all holidays now, but these are actually the Chagim. Just a little bit of non-Jewish history. This is why it's during these three, right? Right before Passover, we prepare by making crackers, right? We're making matzah. We're getting rid of all the leaven. Shavuot's a dairy and fruit festival. It's only one night. Sukkot, how do we prepare? With palm fronds. So in the Christian scripture, when it talks about they greeted him with palm fronds, was he coming back for Passover or Sukkot?
Sukkot.
We don't cut palm fronds in spring. But theologically, their theology of winter being defeated by spring, evil being defeated by good, Jesus resurrecting or rising, is all. It makes better. It works better with spring. But in fact, probably with Sukkot, because we don't cut palm fronds as a general rule in April, March. Okay, so you got these three festivals. So it tells you that we've got Shabbat and the three festivals. Please continue all the way through number 19, please.
Somebody else?
No, just keep going. Just finish.
The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk.
Okay. Mussar, halal. Meat and milk. That's why we can't eat cheeseburgers.
Mhm.
That line right there is repeated 3 times. You should not boil a calf in its mother's milk. So there's an old story that God says to Moses, you shall not boil a calf in its mother's milk. And Moses says, so I can't have any milk with that particular cow. Moses, don't boil a calf in its mother's milk. So I can't have milk and calf and cow at the same time. Moses, don't boil a calf in its mother's milk. So I can't have any dairy product next to any meat product for 6 hours. Fine, Moses, have it your way. Okay. That's the line, which is repeated 3 times, that prohibits us from having cheeseburgers, just so you know. And it's tied to the festivals and to Shabbat. That's how important it is. Because these are all times of distinction. Shabbat is distinguished from, the holiness of Sabbath is distinguished from the holiness of the weekday or the week year. Each of the festivals are specifically holy for their own reason. So is Basar B'Chalav. Meat's holy, milk's holy. You don't mix them because you don't mix death and life. Yeah.
To me, this always was a sense of morality too.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
It was a
It's
moral.
cruel.
It was a moral question with this as well.
What
It
was
is.
it?
Okay.
I'm sorry that they taught us in school that it was because there was a people across the road who did do that and boiled them the babies
And they got
in
sick.
mother's milk. No, it was cruel and it was inhumane and we opted not to do that.
That may be a part of it, but the reality is it's an ethical statement.
Okay.
Like all of kashrut, you're going to find is an ethical statement. It's all about ethics. It's not about the rules themselves. By the way, can you eat milk and meat together?
I go so bold to say yes, but within certain times of each other. In other words,
Okay, so
if the taste of meat lasts longer, you're not supposed to have the milk product while you still have a.
that's one halacha.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are lots of halachas. So first of all, the idea is that it's all rabbinic understanding, right? Because it says here just no meat and milk. So the understanding is you can't have them in the same meal, which means in Germany you can't have them where they eat every 6 hours. You need to have 6 hours between milk and meat. And in Sweden, you need 90 minutes. Okay, because it's about meal. But beyond that, could you actually have milk and meat? Is there any reason you could have milk and meat together?
If it's chicken, because the chicken.
Chicken. That's the whole. So the reason we can't have chicken is chicken is considered meat, not because it is meat, But because in the Middle Ages, it would again
Could
rabbinic
be
law,
confused.
they could be easily confused that if someone would think they're eating burnt chicken when they're actually eating burnt beef. So the rabbis create a fence around it and say, okay, no, chicken's going to count as meat. Chicken should be part of Technically,
Fish
that's not-
obviously is not
right? But so when could you have meat? When could you have at what point could you ever have a cheeseburger?
if you were dying and it was the only thing there,
That's
you're
one way.
required to eat it.
Okay, take it farther. If you're sick and somehow you need, I can't imagine anyone saying you got to have milk and meat at the same time. But if the doctor did, what about what else?
Forced to be
If you're forced to eat it,
or die or something.
correct. We are to live by the words of Torah, not die by the words of Torah.
So if you're being tortured or whatever, and they say prove that you're not Jewish or whatever it might be, but you wouldn't want to do that. But
Yeah,
If the answer is die or eat a cheeseburger, you eat the cheeseburger.
Pork.
Yeah.
Pork.
I mean, if it's Big Mac, it'll kill you eventually anyhow. So, okay, I have to tell you guys. So we're in Tiberias, and there's a kosher McDonald's.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
It's got the texture, and it says kosher next to McDonald's. Kids have never had McDonald's, so we got kosher McDonald's. God awful.
Yep, yep.
God awful. It was just so horrific and so overpriced and just horrible on every level.
May I, please, when I took my sons to Israel, rather than have big bar mitzvah parties, we decided to do that. So this was in 1981. They wanted hot dogs. We went to a grocery store and bought a package of hot dogs. We boiled them. The water turned red. The hot dogs turned gray, and they tasted like sawdust. It was the worst experience eating hot dogs.
I don't know why you want that in Israel. Now you can have fresh shawarma and falafel.
Kids wanted hot dogs.
Food's amazing there. I mean, everything's better there. So this all comes from. All right, let's continue on. Would someone please turn to chapter 34? I think it is. Remember, 13 is a very important number, right? We're just going through this. We're going through things quickly, but so Moses smashes the tablets, and they argue about who's going to should God be able to be kind to people? And it's like, did anyone ever see Grumpy Old Men or The Odd Couple? This is Moses and God's relationship, like two old men who are arguing all the time. So Moses pleads to God, and he says, they argue about should people live, should they not? But then Moses, after the golden calf incident, Moses pleads to God, and he says, "Show me your presence." And God says to him, "Look, you can't see my presence because if you do, you'll die. It's too great. But I'll make my goodness pass before you. I shall call out with the name of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh before you, and I shall show favor when I choose to show favor, and I shall show mercy when I choose to show mercy. You cannot see my face, for no human can see my face and live." But so what he does is he takes Moses and he puts him in the cleft of a rock, and he passes before him, and Moses sees his back. And the Midrash says, you know what he sees? He sees God's tefillin knots, because God wears tefillin too. Tefillin's already been talked about in here, and tefillin is our wedding ring. This is our ketubah. Tefillin are our wedding ring. That's why when you wrap it on your fingers, you say the quote from Hosea, I would betroth you to me in loving kindness, etc. that you do about astikli, which we say weddings often. So Moses sees that, and he calls out God's name. These are the 13 attributes, the 13 midot. 13 already, every time we see 13, what's it a symbol of? Love. Every time you see the number 13, it's always love. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, right? We hear it on high holidays. We hear it all the time. Now, the understanding about these 13 attributes is that this is the true name of God. because it is God's qualities. And that's how you know who someone is. Okay? I call my wife Allison, but I also call her sweetheart because she is the sweetness in my heart. I mean, we kind of fall into that, right? Alan calls Carolyn queen and mistress. Right? Isn't that what you told me? You told me second only to Hashem. Isn't that what you said? So, right. But our names really define who we are. We are our names, and our names are us. That's why naming a child is so important. And these are God's qualities. Now, the understanding is that when we call out God's full name, God must listen. So if I say Ben to my son Ben, he's going to listen in one way. If I say Benjamin George Barclay, get over here, he's going to be a little bit more attentive, isn't he? Right? In the same way, we're calling out God's full name. And so when we call it out, it is said that whatever prayers we have must be answered by his agreement. He's given us the name, we must answer them. God needs to keep his covenant with us. We remind God constantly of that. And so we call out these names. Now, there's one attitude that you should not call out these names on Shabbat. It's an Ashkenazi. Okay? That if you're on a Shabbat service, that you don't call out the names. There's another attitude in the Sephardi that you do. Why? Because the Ashkenazi rabbis said it's a prayer of petition and we don't petition on Shabbat. Sephardi said no, it's a prayer of praise and we do praise on Shabbat. I side with the Sephardi, as I do most of the time, actually. Why? Because we do it on Yom Kippur, don't we? Which is the Shabbat of Shabbats. And we do call it out. So to me, it's clearly that it's praise, not petition. But so if you go into an Orthodox Ashkenazi service, you will not hear the 13 attributes as part of the service on a Saturday. Go to Sephardic one, you usually will. Okay? So we have these 13 attributes of God. And we move on, we talk about the Sabbath, and that will end us with the book of Shemot. Okay, we're talks about the Ark and things like that, but we're gonna move past most of that stuff. Let's go. I changed my mind. Let's go to 39, and let's go to I think it's chapter 39. Hold on. Pick a day. Pretty sure it's pick a day. You have these vestments. Let me just look here. Yeah. So. Oh, I forgot something important. I'm sorry. I apologize. My mistake. Before we have the 10 Commandments, I have to backtrack. Backwards. Can someone please go to chapter 17, verse 1? Exodus. I probably forgot it because I've been talking about it nonstop for 2.5 weeks. 17:1. Please read.
I will. By the Lord's. Wait a minute. Sorry.
Actually, you can start on 17:8.
8?
Yeah, I think you can start on 17:8.
Okay. And Moses said to Joshua.
Actually, no. Start on 1 because there's another reason.
Okay. And all the community of Israelites journeyed onward from the wilderness of Sin on their journeyings by the Lord's direction, and they encamped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. And the people disputed with Moses, and they said, "Give us water that we may drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you dispute with me, and why do you test the Lord?" And the people thirsted for water there. And the people murmured against Moses and said, "Why is it you brought us up from Egypt to bring death on me and my children and my livestock by thirst?" And Moses called out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do with this people? Yet a little more, and they will stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Pass before the people, and take with you some of Israel's elders and the staff with which you struck the Nile, and take in your hand and go. Look, I'm about to stand before you there on the rock in Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come from it, and the people will drink." And thus did Moses do before the eyes of Israel's elders. And he called the name of the place Mussar and Meribah, testing and dispute, for the disputation of the Israelites, and for their testing the Lord. saying, "Is the Lord in our midst or not?"
Okay, so that's one of the times when he's told and he gets water from a rock. Another time we're going to find later on, he's told to get water from a rock again. This time he gives all the credit to God, doesn't he? Next time they're going to say before the rock, he and Aaron are going to say, "Shall we bring forth water?" And we're going to talk about that when it gets to it. I just want to remind you of that. Just remember that paragraph. It'll come back in a week or two. Okay, please read the next part because this is the part that we really needed to read tonight.
Where are we, Ron?
Chapter 17, verse number 8.
And Amalek came and did battle with Israel at Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men for us and go out, battle against Amalek tomorrow. I shall take my station on the hilltop with the staff of God in my hand." And Joshua did as Moses had said to him to battle against Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur had gone up to the hilltop. And so when Moses would raise his hand, Israel prevailed. And when he would put down his hand, Amalek prevailed. And Moses' hands grew heavy, and they took a stone and put it beneath him, and he sat upon it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on each side, and it happened that his hands were steady till the sun came down. And Joshua disabled Amalek and its people by the edge of the
Okay,
sword.
we're going to stop there for a moment. So what happens? We stand up on a chair. What happens? Moses goes to the top of the hill. I love having high ceilings. And when his arms are up, where's everyone looking? And so they're looking to guidance and support from?
God.
He gets tired. Everyone's heads go down, and they think that they're doing it. So he gets helpers, Aaron and Hur. So the people are constantly looking up. Why do they beat Amalek? How do they beat Amalek?
The sword.
How do they beat Amalek?
The edge of the sword.
Because of God,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
right? Because they're looking up. When the sword's the sword, but every time they're looking up and they're remembering what they're supposed to be doing. Israel's at war with Amalek. And as long as they remember its holiness, that they are doing this and fighting Amalek, and as long as we in the diaspora are like Hur and Aaron and support them, they will win.
They will prevail.
What, God forbid, happens if Aaron and Hur decide to go hang out somewhere else? And so what is our obligation as diaspora Jews? Our obligation as diaspora Jews is to support Israel unconditionally, no matter how tired they get. And if you think you're tired, and Allison says when you're tired, you're doing all this writing, you're doing all this speaking. You know what? Not nearly as tired as the boys and the men and women who are in the IDF right now. So they got to do that, number one.
It relates back to the last sentence in chapter 17.
We're going to get to that right now. So would you please read chapter 17, verse 14.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Inscribe this in a document as a reminder and read it aloud to Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and named it Adonai Nisi. He said it means hand upon the throne of the Lord. The Lord will be at war with Amalek throughout the ages.
Generation to generation. Who is Amalek? Amalek is the one who sits there and attacks the Hebrews from behind, where the weak, the children, the old, the young, the sick are. It is unforgivable. Look through the Bible. Everybody's forgiven. They screw up one after another, and they're all forgiven, aren't they? David's going to go biddy bop biddy bing with Sheba. Okay, and David's going to go do his thing, right? David's going to.
He kills somebody.
He kills somebody. He kills Nathan. He kills Nathan for this woman. He's forgiven. Everybody gets forgiven. Forgiven. You know who doesn't get forgiven? Saul. We're going to get to that. Later on, we learn about King Saul. King Saul is at battle with the Amalekites. He kills all the Amalekites. Well, it doesn't kill them all. Their animals and some of their women and children are still around because he says, on the Torah, but Midrash, or one of the commentaries, he says, why should the young be punished for the sins of the old? What happens to him? King Saul, he unifies our tribe. our 12 tribes. Great king. Samuel shows up, says, God says, you're deposed. You're done. Samuel cuts off their heads. And he says, you're deposed. And that's why you have King David. Leaves the line of Saul. We are commanded to kill Amalek. There is no joy in it. And we are commanded to do it. It is our mission. We need to do it. It is that simple. And Hamas became Amalek the moment they decided to do what Amalek did. It's not just Hamas. You do not negotiate with the perpetrator. Do you know that over, I think it's like 2/3 of violent abusers will do it again and again and again? Recidivism. If you'd asked me a month ago what to do with Hamas, I would have said we need to do whatever we can to have peace. On October 7th, they made a decision to be Amalek. They made a decision to go consciously after all of the weak, old, sick, young civilians. And they need to be destroyed, not defeated, destroyed, utterly and completely. When I hear things like President Obama say today, that we cannot do that, we need to back off because otherwise we're going to harm our relationships with Palestinians for generations. When I see any of this, it is very infuriating, especially when it comes from Jewish leaders. So there you get to the same question. If your values are not Judaism, if your values are your secular whatever, then you ignore this.
Yeah.
If your values are Judaism, then you can't.
That's why they do that, because it gives them a rationale.
Judaism, a professor at UC once said that Judaism is not about making you feel good, it's about helping you to be better.
Right.
And there's evil in the world and it needs to be destroyed, and you don't negotiate with it. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's horrible. It is so horrible and devastating. And it needs to be done. Only then, by the way, do we get the Ten Commandments. We need to make sure Amalek is destroyed. And in today's world, that is very, very clear what that is. And they made that choice to cross the line you can't come back from.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fear of others coming in, like Hezbollah and the East, the West Bank and Iran, that can't stop. Cannot.
Our job is to serve with God. And so someone yesterday at this event started saying, well, Hezbollah is Amalek too. I said, no, it's not.
No.
Hezbollah is an enemy.
Yeah.
They did not cross this line. They send rockets. Okay, war. We have laws for war. We're going to talk about it on Wednesday. Hamas crossed a line and became Amalek. They chose to do that. And that's the difference. Hezbollah is an enemy. They want Israel destroyed. Okay, fine. A lot of, but this is
We'll
different.
take care of that in the.
But it's not the same thing.
No, it is not.
It's a radically different thing than what happened October 7th. And, we're all old enough at this table to remember that for decades, the catchphrase was never forget.
Right.
Well, you know what's happened? We forgot. Holocaust survivors are dead, and we've forgotten, and it's not even taught in most American schools to kids. And as a result, why should we be surprised that everyone's siding with Hamas? And we have short memory. There was a video, and I said, Austin, you need to see this. She goes, I can't. I haven't watched anything in a while, and I just can't. It's just too painful. I said, that's exactly why you need to see it. And so she did, because we need to bear witness. We need to be clear about that. And it says it right here. It says it very, very clearly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It says it repeatedly that he will be at war forever.
Yeah.
From generation to generation. It is our job. And destroying it. Yeah.
A quick question. If, and
What if it's not a quick question? What if it's a
No,
slow
no.
question?
Well, a quick answer then.
A slow question.
If Iran actually perpetrated it through their instruction to Hamas, do they then become?
It's an interesting question. It's an interesting question. You have to look at a lot of halacha to decide that. I don't know. I would try and err on the side of compassion. Because they did this.
So it's the perpetrators, not the people who caused it.
I don't know what the law would be, honestly, about whether the people who caused it.
Yeah.
Because then the question is, did they cause it? Did they say you have to do this, or what was the penalty if you didn't?
Right.
That kind of thing. Was it just, hey, here's an idea? Or was it, okay, if you don't do this, we're going to nuke you? We're going to nuke you in Gaza if you don't do what we say. And so, but there's no, and I'd rather err on the side of compassion, but clearly it's not. All right. So we get to all these laws, and we finish the book of Exodus, understanding that we are now on our journey. Okay? And we're going to go on our journey, and our next book is going to be Vayikra, which actually means "and he called." It's a double entendre. It doesn't mean Leviticus. Leviticus is the word that means about the Levites, which are the descendants of Aaron. I'm sorry, descendants of Levi. Kohanim, who are descendants of Aaron, is a subsect of Levites. Does everyone get that? Yes? Okay. So the Levites, they call Leviticus. It's not. It says Vayikra. It's a double entendre. It means "and he called." It means both the calling of the priest to God and the calling of God to the people. Okay? And we're going to end on one little piece about Vayikra. So we teach Torah as written by God. Okay? Or dictated by God. But there's a whole other concept that is very different. So I'm going to explain why it exists, and this is when end the night, because I really don't like spending a lot of time on this, but I think it's worth just spending. If you want to learn a little bit about it, you can get a book called "Who Wrote the Bible?" Fabulous book. It's written for the layperson. It's a fabulous book. Okay. So we believe that God, our traditional belief is God dictates the Torah, right? When I was a young man, I believed that the Torah was inspired words of men. I do not believe that. I do not believe a human being wrote the Torah. I'm very open about that. I understand that's an ultra-Orthodox perspective. That is what I believe. I've studied enough that I don't believe any human mind could have done it. Okay? And I believe Friedman who wrote the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's written by Friedman. Okay. There's another theory that the linguistics of the Torah are strange in different places, but we've got to back up and where what's called biblical criticism begins. So, everyone from a traditional point of view accepted that the Torah is written by God, the prophets and the writing are written by men inspired by God, and the Christian scriptures, if you're Christian or Catholic, are they written by God or men? Men. Which means out of all those writings, what's the most important part?
God.
Torah. Okay. Now, you're a devout Catholic scholars, right? You got a problem. Because here I am, and I say, well, why should I listen to your text? The Torah is written by God, even according to you. So why should I have the word of men supplant the word of God? You say, I don't have to do anything except Jesus into your into your heart. The Torah says, I got to get circumcised and not eat lobster. Okay? Why should I listen to you when yours is by men and the Torah is written by God? It's a great theological question, isn't it? And it's a great question to really tear apart the church. Right? If you think about it. Well, you can't argue, so you need to get to a place where the Torah and the rest of the sacred texts are at the same level. You can't argue that the book of Matthew or the book of Jeremiah were written by God. So what do you need to do? You need to demonstrate that the Torah was written by men. Okay, you guys following the logic here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. And so you get something called biblical criticism, which starts to look at things in terms of, oh, it really comes from somewhere else. So if you look linguistically, you find that there's a lot of times where God is called Yud He Vav He, okay, throughout the text. You find that there's a lot of times where God is called El or Elohim. Okay, you guys, okay? You find that the language of Deuteronomy is different than the language of the other 4 books linguistically, etymology. So, and it's similar more to actually the writings of the book of Jeremiah. And so you have this language that just is sort of like Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy language. You have the book of Vayikra, where it's all about the agenda of the priests, of the Kohanim, of the Levites. Okay? And so you get this concept of biblical criticism called JEPDR. Okay? J for Yahweh, E for Elohim, P for priests, D for Deuteronomy, R for redactor. And so what happens is redactor with an OR and ER. Yeah, make it easy. The person who redacted. So the idea being that there was a Torah written by some of the Jews who called God Yud He Vav He. There's a Torah written by some of the Jews who called it Elohim. There are books and teachings and parts of the Torah that are written by priests, the ones with a priestly agenda. You got another part of the Torah who wrote Deuteronomy, and you got some guy who redacted and put them all together into one piece. And that's called, and his name was Ezra. That's the theory. So if you study biblical criticism, or if you study Bible in any place outside an ultra-religious seminary or an ultra-religious setting, go to UCLA, you start taking classes in Bible, you will learn what was that? I liked it. It was kind of like Tinkerbell. You will learn that they will teach that it's J, P, E, D, and R. 4 different authors redacts it together. If you read who wrote the Bible, it's an amazing argument to prove that it's true, by the way. Because you take the story of Noah, and if you just take out all of the phrases that call God with the Yod He Vav He and all that call God with an Elohim, you have 2 complete stories individually. And he pairs them up next to each other. Brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant. And from a linguistic standpoint, this is pretty much unarguable. It's incontrovertible. I like that word. Okay? From a linguistic standpoint. Except, if I was an omniscient, omnipresent God that wanted to create a text that people would wrestle with and argue about, I might actually just create it that way, huh?
Yeah.
Just so that the secular might decide he wants to argue about it. I put it out because it should be put out in any class, any series we do. You should know that it exists. I believe in my God, but you should know that that does exist. And the Vayikra is all written by the priests in that idea, because the book of Vayikra is all about priestly stuff, the obligations and the privileges of the priestly caste. Yes.
But if God wrote the Torah, he wrote it through people, through men.
Well, no, we're taught traditionally he dictates it to Moses.
Oh, he dictates, and Moses writes it down.
Yeah.
And Moses was around for all the different
No, Moses just writes one document as the traditional teaching. This starts happening around in the 19th century, if I recall, mid-19th century.
Yeah.
You guys start having biblical criticism.
It figures.
Well, why did Moses change the name of God in the different books?
He just writes down what God tells him to write.
Apparently, letter for letter.
Yeah.
And calligraphy for calligraphy.
He was a secretary.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a good secretary. So the point being, I want you to be aware of it. It's a fabulous book to read. I don't think it makes a darn bit of difference in terms of how we practice Judaism or not. Because it doesn't change the text, doesn't change the intention, doesn't change any of it. I will tell you, the more that you study, really study the depths of the text, the more I have, the more I do not buy for a moment that any human being could have written this.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, at all. But that comes with deeper and deeper study. Like when we talked about Bereshit, that word that's made up, things like that. So we're going to continue next week with, wait. We may not have class next week.
Next week?
We're not having class next week. I apologize. Because we go away for Halloween. So hopefully we will be going. We typically go away for Halloween because I don't want my kids trick or treat.
You know what?
I don't let my kids trick or treat. We don't trick or treat.
I agree with you.
They haven't been doing much of it lately, fortunately.
Although, you know what? I just also don't like the fact that Halloween's become a pimp and hoe party. I just am not a fan. So we do have Teen Talmud tomorrow at 4, correct?
Yes.
Okay, me too. I think so too. So did anyone learn? You guys all learn something new tonight?
Yes.
Fabulous. So
I have one question
Yes.
you have to help me with. One of my truly best friend is a Christian. He believes that I will become a completed Jew someday.
Okay.
That's Jew for Jesus. And I will not, and he knows that. But
there's another. Any of the
But
Bibles.
we are wonderful friends.
Okay.
His point is the Talmud. When I say, well, the Talmud sort of guides us, a little bit, doesn't it? I mean,
It's a lot.
a lot. And he says, but that's the word of man. That was rabbis. How does that?
No, when we get to Talmud, you're going to see why that's not true. It's the word of God.
Okay, I have to be able to answer him.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you could pass your no. The simple answer, have them come to the class on Talmud when we get to Talmud.
That is a great idea.
Okay. Because
I
we
will.
have written law. We're off, right? What? What I do? What I say? There's a question?